again, this conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started here. This is Kristen, and we're here to talk to you guys about LSVT Big. It's something that we're both certified in providing, and we just wanted to share that with everybody in hopes of growing this program because it's just so excellent. And try and change slides here. So as I said, my name's Kristen Chuba. I'm at the 43rd Avenue Clinic, for those of you that don't know me.
And I'm Kristen Kincaid. I'm over at the Avenue Clinic in Moline. And we've both been certified since 2017 in LSVT Big. So I thought we would start off with just a little bit of a recap on what happens with Parkinson's disease. So if you remember back from your experiences in school, Parkinson's disease is a neurodegenerative disorder, primarily focused in the basal ganglia. If you remember, the basal ganglia is in charge of internally generated movements with both inhibitory and excitatory effects. So it can both allow you to perform a desired movement or to suppress unwanted movement. And depending on where this disorder is happening, it determines what effects you're going to see. So if you are affecting the area where you are unable to suppress those unwanted movements, you're going to see things more like in Huntington's disease. Whereas with Parkinson's, you're seeing more of that difficulty performing desired movements. So these changes within the basal ganglia cause three different kinds of weaknesses in that system. First, your get ready signal becomes weakened, where you're going to see things like bradykinesia, slowed movement, and also hypokinesia, decreased movement. And then you also will see your go signal becoming weakened. Things like freezing gait and start hesitation. And finally, the no-go signal can also become weakened. You'll see things like festination and sequential movements becoming more difficult and running together. So with these changes, you're going to see this vicious cycle starting. So you're going to get that decreased signal amplitude within the basal ganglia, which in turn causes you to produce those small, slow movements. And over time, these people aren't even having necessarily the awareness that their movements are becoming smaller. Over time, that decrease in self-perception of the movement quality causes decreased cueing to make those movements normal sized. And that in turn feeds right back into producing smaller movement cues. So this cycle continues, movements start to become smaller and smaller, and eventually become kind of that typical Parkinsonian presentation. So currently, there are a variety of treatment options available. Your first line of defense that you're going to see are typically your medications. You'll also see possible use of deep brain stimulators. There's also several movement treatment options, things like bicycling, rock steady boxing you may have heard of, and I think just started up in the Ankeny location at Rock Valley, and then LSVT, which is what we're here to talk to you about today. So LSVT actually stands for Lee Silverman Voice Treatment. Originally, this did start out as a speech therapy back in 1987. Over the last 25 years, there's been a variety of different studies looking at whether these effects are placebo or maintained, and it is proven for participants to maintain benefits for up to 2 years after treatment. So that original program began to divide out into two subgroups. There's still the speech therapy program called LSVT Loud, provided by a speech language pathologist. And there's two different options of providing this treatment. You can either do it in person or over webcam. There's also Big Therapy, which is more of that movement system approach, and that's either provided by a PT or an OT. And this is always going to be in person. So with LSVT Loud, that speech program, you're going to be looking for the normal type of speech improvements such as increased loudness, better articulation, improved intonation, and even possibly some improvements in facial expression. So working on some of that masked faces that you see with Parkinson's disease. With LSVT Big, we're looking more for faster walking, bigger steps, increased trunk rotation, so better movement quality during gait, as well as improved balance. And we're going to see improvements carrying over into activities of daily living and improvements in the Unified Parkinson's Disease Rating Scale, which covers many domains, including mood, speech, cognition, movement quality, things like tremors, rigidity, walking quality, and activity of daily living performance. So looking at the underlying principle behind Big therapy, the idea is to disrupt that vicious cycle that we talked about several slides ago. So what we start with is working on increasing the motor amplitude output, focusing on increasing effort, increasing cue amplitude for carryover into increased movement size, big movements, big steps, big arm reaches, things like that. Over time, also calling the patient's attention to their movements improves the self-perception and awareness of the amplitude, which will feed into improved self-cueing, and then over time improvement in that whole cycle. So by increasing and improving this awareness, you're achieving this thing called calibration, which essentially is building up that habit of being aware of yourself, being aware of your movement size, not having to rely on someone else, an external source, to cue you. So like all habits, calibration takes time, it takes effort, and Kristen is now going to talk about how this is specifically achieved through LSVT Big.
So when someone participates in LSVT Big, what they can expect is to be seen in an individual 1-hour session, 4 days a week for 4 weeks. In that time, we're working on a lot of different things in the clinic, as well as things on their own for homework and carryover practice. In all, we're trying to create a lifelong habit of practice. Now, at the end of that 4 weeks, if someone's movements are not calibrated yet, it's not automatic for them to take that bigger step with walking, we can add on to the end of that session. So the 4 weeks is not the end all be all. So a typical session consists of 7 specific exercises that they've developed through research in an effort to try and combat those typical things that we see with Parkinson's disease. These exercises can be adapted to anyone's ability level. They can be done in a laying down position, in a seated position, standing with holding on, or standing and not holding on. Recently, I had someone in this program who was even more advanced beyond standing and not holding on, so we did these exercises on a yoga mat to provide a unsteady surface for him to try and do those exercises on. So we can make it to whatever person's ability level and make sure that they're still safe when they're performing these different tasks. The next thing that we work on are called functional component tasks, and these are 5 everyday tasks that are selected by the patient of different things that are important to them. Some examples might be transitioning from sit to stand, getting their keys out of their pocket, turning around in a small area, going up and down the stairs to their basement, anything that they would typically do throughout the day. And then you've got your hierarchy task, which again is a patient identified task, and these are more complex movements, such as getting in and out of bed, getting in and out of the car, golf, walking to take the trash out would be another example of a hierarchy task. And then the last thing that we practice is walking with those bigger steps, faster gait speed, reciprocal arm swing. So the overall goal is, again, to have patients use these bigger movements automatically without thinking about it, that calibration, they call it through this program. So our cues to someone who's participating in this program is that we're doing movements as big as you can, but within a pain-free range of motion. So if someone has a chronic rotator cuff tear, or they've had a total shoulder replacement, or they've got bad back pain, all of these things are as big as they can, but without aggravating any other issues that are going on for someone. We're trying to improve someone's walking ability to take care of themselves by improving their perception of movements and making it closer to what other people see. The person with Parkinson's disease, to them, what comes out as a typical effort to get up from a chair or take a big step or take a step only comes out maybe at 50 to 25% of what we would typically do. So we ask also these patients to try and put in an 8 out of 10 effort with each thing that they're doing. That's how much above and beyond they have to go to make that normal sized effort. So the outcomes. In here, I put together a couple of bits and pieces of patients that I've already seen in this program. So first, Mr. B had been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease 6 to 7 months before starting the program. It was initially starting in his right foot with some tremors and freezing and progressing to involve the right leg. He was taking Cinemet for medication, but it was starting to wear off for him. He had had 3 to 4 falls in the past year, generally going forward. He had some freezing issues with going through a door or changing surfaces from carpet to a tiled floor or throw rugs. He was using the walker most of the time, living with his wife in a 2-story home with a basement. And at the time of the evaluation, he was needing some physical assistance with getting in and out of the shower, but everything else he was able to do on his own. His goals were to no longer need an assistive device, be able to get in and out of the shower independently, and continue to help out around the house by taking out the trash. So we did some standardized tests here to start out, and you can see his pre-values compared with his post values. And he really did have quite a bit of improvement in all areas. For example, with the 30-second sit-to-stand test, which is a test that is looking at someone's muscle strength and power in their lower extremities. Initially, he was able to do 12 times without needing the upper extremity for support, but as he was fatiguing, he was uncontrolled in his descent back into the chair. He would flop back down into the chair. Whereas at the end, he was able to do 18 times without using his arms for assist, no loss of balance, and control descent back into the chair. For him, some of his biggest changes were the longer distance walking and short distance walking. The 6-minute walk test, initially he was able to cover 840 feet with the wheeled walker, compared with 1,350 feet with a straight cane. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with this test specifically, an improvement of 50 feet is considered statistically significant or clinically significant. So he made a very large difference with that. Again, the timed up and go, he ended up finishing in 9 seconds with just the use of the cane, compared with 25 seconds with using the wheeled walker. Standing balance got better as well, as you can see there, is measured with the Berg. We did end up also working on stair climbing as well, and we went from being able to go up and down with a step 2 pattern and heavy use of both handrails to either being able to go with a reciprocal pattern using one handrail or a step-to pattern, only using the cane, which was used for when he was assisting with taking out the trash. Another individual that I worked with, Mr. C, had been only diagnosed with Parkinson's for 1 to 2 months prior, but he had had signs of Parkinson's for 10 plus years. He's someone that I had treated for chronic low back pain in the past and general deconditioning. And in speaking with his daughter, who was his primary caregiver, they knew what was going on, but they didn't want to overwhelm him with the burden of he had this thing. So they were just trying to work with what they could with him. Initially, he had a resting tremor in his hands and his jaw. He had just started taking medication, so no real wearing off effect yet with him. Earlier in the year that I had seen him, he had been in the hospital with the flu, so he was deconditioned from that on top of everything else. And again, like I said, some really significant low back pain. He would have freezing issues with turning, initiating walking after getting up from a chair, and also with crowded areas. He's using the walker most of the time. And currently needing physical assistance with getting up from a chair, bed mobility. He had a CNA coming to the house who would help with shower activities, and he was no longer driving at this point. His goals were significantly different than his daughter's goals. The patient wanted to, for example, get rid of the walker and be able to walk on his own confidently, improve his balance, get up from a chair by himself, get in and out of bed by himself, and be able to look someone in the eye while having a conversation at dinner. Because his posture from just a lot of lumbar stenosis and cervical stenosis was pretty poor. His initial posture, in fact, was such that he was more or less looking at his knees in a sitting position. And his caregiver goals were more realistic as far as she didn't really care if he still used the walker or not, as long as he was safe around the house. His improvements are listed here in this table. You can see with the 30-second sit to stand test, initially he was unable to get up from the standard chair unless he had moderate assist from the physical therapist. And afterwards, he was able to get up from a chair 3 times using his arms on his own. The timed up and go test, I think, is the most amazing change for this patient. You can see it took us 2 minutes, 59 seconds to complete with the wheeled walker versus 27 seconds with the wheeled walker at time of discharge, which is just huge improvement for him. We were able to practice getting in and out of bed as well as part of our functional task components. And initially, he could get out of bed, but could not get into bed by himself. So he was able to manage his upper body, but he needed max assist with managing his lower body with that sit to sideline transition. And by the end of it, with really focusing on some bigger movements as he was going through that, we were able to get him up into bed on his own, managing his upper and lower body on his own. So here we have a couple of videos. For those of you that are on Facebook, the first video I'll show you here is a patient of mine, Bev. She was on the Rock Valley Facebook page of her results after participating in Big. So here's Bev. Can you guys all see Bev? She's able to walk more confidently in her home after doing LSVT Big. We'll play it again here for you guys. So you can see how she is now able to take an initiating step with walking big, long strides, long arm swings, no freezing as she was turning around. And those were all issues for her prior to starting the program. The other video here that I want to show you is something that they showed us in the certification class for this program, and it shows individual walking pre and post side by side. So it's really nice, and you can see the changes in his quality of walking. So we'll switch over to that video here. So on the left side will be him pre-treatment, and on the right side will be him post-treatment. And you can see the difference in the quality of ambulation there. Here he's already to the door and out the door and around the corner. And on the left, pre-treatment, same time, real time, he's still getting tangled up on the rug and someone else coming into the door. So just the pre and post is absolutely amazing, the difference, especially when you put it side by side like this, and you can really see the difference in his quality of walking, his speed of walking, and just how much everything is much easier for him to get around. And then it's going to show him getting into the car and any difficulties he might have with that. Okay, so we'll stop that there and switch back over to our PowerPoint. So how do we know if someone is appropriate for LSVT type of program? We all have people who talk about, oh, their neighbor or their family member has this thing, and just in conversations that we have with our patients or people we come into contact with outside of work. So if someone is appropriate for this type of treatment approach, it is a very high frequency, high intensity program. So they should be motivated and expect to be able to participate in that 4 days a week, 1 hour session for 4 weeks. LSVT is appropriate for really any type of motor symptoms who respond to amplitude cueing. So it's only researched for individuals with Parkinson's disease at this time, but other people can benefit from that program as well. As just has not been researched yet. Two, if you're not sure, just ask us and we'd be happy to answer any questions. How much does it cost is a common question that we receive, or if you bring this up to a patient or a patient's family member or a neighbor or whoever that you might receive. It's billed under the same CPT codes as far as traditional therapy goes. However, we do reach the Medicare cap faster just because of that increased frequency and duration, and to spending 60 minutes with someone versus 40 minutes with someone, even if it is a lower paying insurance type such as Medicare, we would have 4 codes versus 3 codes. The thing to remember as far as Medicare and really all insurances go is medical necessity. So as long as someone is improving and they're making progress toward their goals, they need that skilled care that we can provide, then that's acceptable. What if they've already done LSVT in the past? That is okay. They can repeat the program, and that's something that we've been telling our patients down the road, 6 months down the road, a year down the road, 3 years down the road, whatever it is. If you feel like you're losing ground with your balance and your walking, come see us again. The nice thing now with us both being on the Illinois side of the river and having direct access is we can easily have someone come in repeat those same standardized tests and see really easily, has there been a decrease in function, to just further justify the need for skilled physical therapy in that individual. So here is all of our contact information for you guys. Like I said, I'm at the 43rd Avenue, and Kristen Kincaid is at the Avenue of the Cities. We have down there our email and phone numbers for our respective clinics, if you guys want to jot those down. And like I said, at any time, if you think of anything question-wise, or you have a patient who's wondering if we could reach out to them, since we know more of those details of care for LSVT program, I think I can speak for both of us when I say that we'd be more than willing and happy to do that. So our key points: LSVT Big is a neurologically based, research-supported intervention that's tailored to each and every patient's needs and goals. Even though it's most effective in more the early stages of Parkinson's disease, it can help regardless of the level of function currently for that individual or the stage of the disease progress. I mean, remember Mr. C, it took him almost 3 minutes to get up, walk 10 feet, turn around, come back and sit down. But even he made an absolutely amazing improvement post. On the other hand of that, these things can be changed for people who are higher functioning. As I said, I had an individual in this program who was just really not even challenged anymore by the regular standing, not holding on exercises. So we made it harder, and we challenged him at his level of function. Another thing to remember is, we talked here today about a lot of gross motor things. This can also be applied for fine motor things as well. A lot of times, people with Parkinson's disease will have what they call micrographia, which is a smaller handwriting. There are tricks that we can use to improve someone's legibility with handwriting or other fine motor things like buttoning a button. I had another patient practicing manipulating money. He wanted to be able to pay for dinner instead of handing his wife the wallet. So we worked on manipulating money out of his wallet as one of the functional components. So all in all, referral is easy. Just call or email the Kristens, and we'd be happy to answer any of your questions. But that was all we really had laid out for today. So now we'll open it up to you guys. Any questions that you might have, please type them into the chat box, and then we will address those. Any questions from anybody?
Can I just ask one?
Okay, sure.
Kind of long. Okay, so this is Carrie and DeWitt and Brittany and Chelsea. And not selling your guys' credentialing process short in any way, but for those of us that are in the outlying areas, is there something that like you guys, we could send people your way for an evaluation, and then we could follow a protocol that you provide for those 4 days a week for an hour each session?
Actually, they've LSVT Big and the people who are running that program, because it is so specific in how to have someone do those exercises and the different cueing that you give to someone. They don't want people who are not certified in LSVT techniques providing even the exercises and things. If that's something that you guys are interested in those outlying areas and becoming certified in, it's really easy to do. I did my class in person. It was a weekend. My continuing education money covered all of it. You have to take a test at the end of it as well.
I actually did mine online. They get you all the same type of slides. You've got, I think, a month to be able to complete it if that's more accessible to you. You don't quite get the same in-person practice, but I would say I still feel adequately prepared to see people for it.
Yeah, that was the nice thing about the in-person class was at the last day they had a lab where 3 or 4 people from a local clinic who had Parkinson's disease came in, and we tried some of the things on them and got to practice instructing an actual patient in those exercises and making sure that we were cueing them appropriately. So that was really nice, and I found really helpful to have that additional feedback.
But your question about being in an outlying area, I mean, just because you're not performing LSVT in its entirety, I mean, that doesn't mean that they can't come in for a consultation. We can see if they're appropriate for amplitude-based treatment. There's been a couple patients that haven't been appropriate for a full LSVT treatment episode, but I still use various aspects of those exercises, of the cueing, things like that in their care. So there's ways to work around. I know transportation can get tricky in those situations for sure.
Yeah, another side note, I've had people who have Parkinson's. We discussed the program at the evaluation and what all was involved, and they just weren't open to doing that at that time. Physical therapy and regular exercise can still help those people. So it's not a reason not to see someone for their balance and walking if maybe they're not willing or not able to participate in that specific program. You can still help them with other ways.
Absolutely.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. And it looks like we have a question here in the text box that's from Allison that says, how do you market yourself as a therapist for LSVT Big? And that's a really good question. And that's something that's kind of been difficult. We found here in this area, it seems like a lot of the neurologists more or less just push medication on people, and that's about it. Most of the referrals that I've had have come as a result of marketing more to general physicians because they tend to see people more often than your neurologist will. And also going to some Parkinson's support groups and telling people about, hey, there's this great treatment out there and this is what it can do for you, and guess what, we do it. And so it's been more of a word of mouth type of marketing, I feel like, so far, and that's been working since we started going to those support groups. That's when I really saw a big uptake in my patients that I've seen in this program.
And that's part of the reason too we're reaching out towards you. I mean, as a physical therapist, we're seeing a lot of patients more on a consistent basis. We're able to pick up on some of those maybe early signs sooner than you might see if you're just going into your primary doc. You don't think it's important to mention, hey, I've got maybe this little tremor, or I'm not getting around as easily as I did, or things like that. So,
or to those people that mention, oh, my neighbor has this issue with their balance, or, well, my grandma has Parkinson's disease, or things like that. So,
yeah.
Any other questions from you guys? All right, well, if there's no other questions, then we'll wrap things up then. Thanks again, guys, for popping in, and we really appreciate it. Again, let us know if you have any questions.
We will be recording this and sending it out as well if you would like access to that.
Yep, or for those who weren't able to attend. Thanks, guys.
Thanks. Pause.
Oh.
This conference will now be recorded.
So when we pushed recording, it didn't do anything, but when we